I'm gonna give my little chat. So, it is done. The dragon is slain. I have finished the race and can rest. 5 days from Conway Castle on the north coast of Wales, across 315 kilometres, 15,500 metres of climbing along the string of mountains to the Black Mountain in the south of Wales. It was wonderful, relentless, 14 hours a day of hardness, inspiring, stunning beauty, great comradeship, joy, and great sadness. The race changed me, and to capture what I got from it, some of that great physical, emotional, and spiritual journey, I wrote a journal. And I wrote it for me, but I'd like to share a bit about this remarkable race and a guide to some of the experiences and some of my failures. So I read a few years ago about the Dragon's Back. It's a race down the mountainous spine of Wales, north to south. North to south. It's the toughest 5-day mountain race in the world. Some just say the toughest race. The concept is very simple. You start in a castle on the north coast of Wales, and you head south into the mountains, and you just keep on going until you emerge from the southern mountains within sight of the sea. And so I knew Snowdon in the north, and I knew Brecon Beacons in the south, and I was intrigued. And sometimes things just kind of get into your head and they don't go out of it. The race was first run in 1992 with 32 pairs of the strongest trail athletes from the USA and Europe. And these were the winners. The logistical support for the race was provided by the parachute regiment, and a close fought battle, Martin Stone and Helen Diamantidis won the race. Fairly big worldwide. They made a movie of it, which was around the world, and it was the first major race won by a woman pretty much anywhere. But it's a pretty challenging race and logistically difficult, so it disappeared until 2012, and it's then been rerun on 2015, 2017, and 2019. So, why? Why would I do such a ridiculously hard challenge? It's asked quite often of me, and I won't deny the short answer, usually given, which is that I'm mad. But perhaps there is a particular origin to this madness. So great journeys have always interested me. My favourite book was The Hobbit, and Bilbo Baggins' adventure from the Shire all the way to the Lonely Mountain to kill Smaug. And at school was this boat. I didn't quite know what it was. I walked past it every day at school. And a bit later I found out and I read Sir Ernest Shackleton's book South, which is his biography of when his ship got stuck in the Antarctic ice and how he then left Elephant Island in this small boat and sailed 900 miles to South Georgia and climbed over the mountains there to the railing station to get help and rescue his men in what is generally perceived to be the greatest feat of navigation ever. And I went back to school a few weeks ago, and it's nicely restored in the science block. I then did other journeys. I kind of did a walking holiday with my dad in the Lake District at age 10, and after school I read books and did things like the Grand Siberian Railway, which is great, and across America a Greyhound, which is interesting. But nothing really of the adventure. I did some sport. I ran the London Marathon in New York, but marathon training is pretty boring, if any of you have done it. And I then had a second baby, or my wife did, and I was part of a startup of an architectural practice, and life just got too much, and I quit. I hung up my shoes, I put on 3 stone, 20 kilograms in 8 months, and I had 8 years of being a prematurely middle-aged couch potato. And then 2 friends, Pete Frost and Ralph, asked me to take part in the 10 Peaks Lake District long course race in 2011. It's quite challenging. It's 73 kilometres long with 5,000 metres of extent in 24 hours over the 10 highest peaks in the Lake District. And there I was. I went like a lamb to the slaughter. I was overweight, unfit, and with very, very poor gear. And I ended up on my own, the last person, with no water stops, everything else is shut. and I finished in a record worst time of 30 hours. A record which will stand forever, because since my accomplishments, they now sweep the course at 24 hours to take anybody off it. It was my first great adventure, and I did have to dig deeper into me, my soul, my character, just to keep going, and than I've ever done before. It chewed me up and spat me out, and it was, I'm a bit amazed even now that I got my broken body over the finish. But my memories are very vivid and overwhelmingly positive, and I was keen to continue. So in 2014, my son also thought it was great. So at 14, my son said, "Dad, can I do it as well?" So we went and did the Brecon Beacons 10 Peaks, and he was the youngest person ever to do it, and it was a bit of interesting. And then shortly after that, life events all kind of got together and led me to a proper rethink of my life, my midlife crisis. And I tried to figure out what was really important in my life: my wife and children, my faith, my health. And at that point, I also came to HMM. And HMM is a company which I am very proudly grateful for, because there's an ethos, I think, here where you work to live, not live to work. And I think it's an important difference. So I got my life together. I lost 2 stone. I gave up bread, pasta and sugar. My son and I took up triathlon. I joined the mighty Epsom and Ewell Harriers running club and the Epsom cycling club. I cycled from Epsom to here and back about 3 or 4 days a week, and which is 15 miles each way. And I lost those 2 stones and got back to 11 stone, 70 kilograms. I then read Vassos Alexander's great book. Book's a big part of this presentation, called Running Up That Hill, which is about his beautifully written but failure of doing the 2017 Dragon's Back race. And there was a movie of the 2017 released at that time, and I got a few friends over and we watched it, and I was very, very keen to do it. So as a practice, my friend Pete and I ran and walked the 105-mile inaugural Devon Coast to Coast race. Unfortunately, there was a rolling storm that came in off the Atlantic just as we started, so we had 39 hours of non-stop rain, which by the second night, non-stop, turned into driving snow and hail. So we were soaked to the skin and went through Dartmoor and then Exmoor. We were tired to the point of, well, I was tired to the point of hallucination. So at one point on the second night, I looked left and there was a 20-metre high cat smiling benignly down at me, which reminded me slightly of the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. It should have been awful, but it was a brilliant adventure. And so inspired by that, my friend and I signed up and paid quite a large amount of money to do the Dragon's Back race. Training seemed to be going pretty well until July 28th, 2018, when I fell off my bike doing a 100-mile time trial in Yorkshire. And I hit the ground and screamed like a pig. The marshal told me I couldn't just lie in the middle of the road, but when I tried to move, I screamed again. I'd broken my leg, and the wonderful staff at York General Hospital operated the next day, put me a metal plate and a dynamic hip screw in my leg, which, and you know what, it was all great fun. You know, they give you a local antiphatic, an epidural, a spinal block, and you get to see, I did ask for a mirror, but they wouldn't give me a mirror. And you see the blood being sucked out over your head and splattered over the surgeon's mask. I really recommend it for interest's sake, but it did put a little bit of a blow to the training. I did have a great rehabilitation specialist, Naomi Linan, and she took me on and she had me balancing on one leg, bouncing up and down on a mini trampette, a little trampoline, swimming, and then the Epsom Harriers and the non-such park run, big up for park run, were very supportive, you know, so as I walked around on crutches and come back, and it was very positive. But I wasn't able to do any recce's of course, and nor any serious mileage in 2018. And I slowly in 2019 built up the mileage, and I was able on Monday, April the 15th, to fulfill my goal and had a place in the Boston Marathon, which was great. Great holiday out there. Time of 3:46 was quite a lot slower than I hoped for, and 20 minutes slower than my qualification time. But I was back running and I was feeling positive and G'd up about it. Most of my training had been on flat land. London, Epsom, Surrey is flat most of the way. My friend and Pete hadn't done much hills. So on the 4th to the 6th of May, we went up to Wales to do a recce. We drove up on Friday and stayed at the day one of the course campsite at the south of Snowdon. And we set off at 6:45 a.m. into the Morwillian Mountains. Thank you. It was beautiful, but there was 3 inches of snow up at the top of it in beginning of May. And then the Rhinogids Mountains, and they really chewed me up. My overly new shoes, make sure you break your shoes in before going to the mountains, and did a thorough job of destroying my Achilles, and I hobbled down finally to the finish point at 2 a.m. That wasn't good physically or mentally. I've raced today with fresh legs, and yet it took me 2 hours and 15 minutes more than the cut-off to reach the deadline. So I felt like a complete failure. I felt like a fraud. I felt like, what's the point of me entering this race? I'm going to be out on day one at the best of it. And I felt a bit like the scrawny little schoolboy last in the line against the wall who isn't selected for a football team. What am I going to do? And at the end of the day, the next day, I lay in bed and I said, Pete, you got it. He went off and did the second day or most of it, and I just thought, why have I done this? So it was just the wake-up call I needed. I thought long and hard about the failure, and I read and watched everything I could about those who completed and those who had not completed and failed the Dragon's Back. I upgraded quite a lot of my kit, and I cut out anything, especially the faffing around, which gets in the way of just finishing the thing. And lastly, my friend Pete and I chatted, and I said, I slowed him down enormously the other day and said, let's not, if you want, go ahead and you do it. Let's do this individually, and he gratefully accepted the anger that I brought down. So on the Saturday before the race, I bagged up my food. Each day a bag of food, morning and afternoon. Each day clothes for each day, and went up, and incredible registration. About 11 stations where they check medical and everything you've got, every bit of kit you have. And if you didn't have it, I didn't have any cash on me. I had to run back into town to get the cash that you need for a taxi if you don't make it. And then Shane, the race director, gives a very detailed, informative presentation from which left you with a very clear understanding that the rules are the rules, and if you break any one of them or you miss a cut off, you are out of the race. Bit of positive, the winner of the first race, Martin Stone, spoke, and he said the best news, which is it is remarkable how much your body can recover overnight, which was good to hear. So we slept a bit, my friend not at all, and we arrived at 6:30 feeling a little nervous, like lambs to the slaughter. And this was a fairly rugged bunch of individuals, 402 individuals in the castle grounds, and the Welsh voice choir started singing out, and then we started running off across the castle hills, and I went out hard. That's me going hard. And then I thought, if I go out hard and I make the cut-offs, then I can take it a bit easier in the afternoon. And I found later that in leaving Conway, I got my first ever Strava King of the Mountain. For those cyclists amongst us, it's a big deal getting the Strava King of the Mountain badge. So went off well to start with. 12:30 we descended into a little lake, and I realised I was 3 hours inside the cut-off. Fortunately, my friend Pete had advised me that those cut-offs were a bit fraudulent, and you had to kind of really go hard to the next one. And we went over a hill, and there came up to Tryfan, which is pretty majestic, and those are people there going at it. And so then it was like, okay, we have met this dragon now, and it was just going to a low gear, pole step, again and again and again, all the way up. and you get up to the top and there's a great view of the Snowdon Horseshoe. And you come off the Glidders at 3:46 to Penny Pass, which is the cut-off and the bag drop. Each day there's a bag there for it. And I found that my 3-hour buffer had gone down to an hour and a half, and actually that a lot of people hadn't made it at that point. And about 50 people were cut off the race by the middle of the first afternoon. There's a guy, Joe Faulkner, who'd done every one of the Dragon's Back, and he said treat every transition, every bag drop and everything like a triathlon transition, exactly what you're going to do. So it was shoes and socks off, check feet, put a Compi plaster on the blister, one blister I got, new dry socks, change of shoes from my old Innovates to my new Innovate shoes, grab, my old ones are great, they're just like a pair of carpet slippers. The dog's eaten them twice, they've done tens of thousands of miles, but they're just so comfy. A new bag of food into my race belt, a volunteer fills up your water bottles, and off. No more than 4 or 5 minutes before arriving. And from Penny Pass Youth Hostel at the bottom of Snowdon, there are 2 wonderful, flat, smooth routes up Snowdon. There's one you could drive most of the way up, the other one you could definitely take a 3-person, 2-baby buggy up. And there's a third way, which is Crib Goch, which is a bit of a legend, which I'd never been up. And it runs parallel to the other 2, but it goes up the knife erect up the course. So I ascended that, the lower bit, and then you come to this vertical section, and then you take your poles away, stow them, and then it's going back to rock climbing like I haven't done for 25 years, which was interesting. And I saw that by this legendary guy, Joe Faulkner, who was in his 60s, and I thought, oh, I'll catch up and I'll try and follow him, and next thing, he disappeared and never seen him. Thank you. At the top there is so I made my way slowly along the edge of this photo. I was clinging on for dear life along most of it. It's a 1,000-foot drop, and most years somebody falls off and dies. But don't do it in winter when heavy wind. And then at the top it was very beautiful, Snowdon Horseshoe. And you just think it's nice to be a gentle descent to camp, but there's actually a couple more little mountains, and twilight's coming down, and it was got quite hard at the end. And that's when I met a guy called Jacob, who'd done about my age, a little bit older. He's done 30 years of triathlon, and we just chatted and we talked about things, and then that enabled the miles just to disappear. So 14 hours and 12 minutes after leaving Conway Castle, but an hour and 50 minutes inside the cut-off, we came into the bag drop. And one of the volunteers gave me my big waterproof bag, my drop bag, and then I was in tent 34 with 7 other guys, and I threw on my down water jacket, blew up my Thermarest, inflatable mat, unrolled sleeping bag, pajamas, pillow, charge kit, check my feet, head torch, grab my dishes, see my friend Pete, just arrived, go and have something to eat, wash up, get into sleeping bag by 10:30, just over an hour. And then at 4:40 the alarm goes off, and go. Hadn't slept much, my legs were throbbing away, and then this is like, how can I cut 2 hours and 15 of what I'd not done 2 weeks before. That's campsite. So new day's clothing, change of socks, shoes, and at 4:58 I'm in line for breakfast with vegetarian sausages and coffee, slightly more appetite, and then wash dishes, pack, hand them in. 6:01 in 29 seconds I dibbed out and was off again. And leaving the camp, you straight into the Morwillian, which are beautiful. No one goes there, people really should. And I found that, like the guide said, a lot of my strength had come back, and I ran and pushed hard. And I was a bit disappointed that at the checkpoint at 12, I was only 35 minutes ahead of the cut-off. So time to go. Past the reservoir, and past the old nuclear power station, and past the Festiniog Railway, and saw my friend Pete at a quick half pint of Coke at the pub, which tastes like nectar. It was amazing. And rolling sheep farms and forests, and then up the Roman steps. And then you're into the rhinos, and they don't look that bad. there's no path up most of them. So you're going up these big rocks and across these marshes, and it's just like trekking where nobody's gone before. But I got out of them before the sun was set, which was great, and I knew that while it was long, I was going to make it. And as the camp came to view, I switched the phone off airplane mode, and I called my wife, Amanda, and the kids. And so I was very happy to join the camp at 9:21. And I found then that they'd been tracking me all day long. And they actually a video feed, so to watch as you go through, and a few people here as well, thank you very much, who were tracking, and it was really sweet. At the end of day 2, I realised I was 308th out of 321 who were still in the race. So 80 people were still there. But hope was getting that maybe I could finish this. I had a migraine that night, which wasn't the best, but so I took a rather strong non-prescription painkiller, which to get hold of it. And up at 4:40 the next morning, not with much sleep. And you go through Dolgothrol and then up to Cadair Idris, which is pretty magnificent. And I was going a bit slow, every step was hard. I hadn't eaten really anything for quite a while. And then I started being able to eat again, and I took with me mountain food. So my mountain food from other things is biltong for the South Africans, and honey roast cashew nuts, which I always can eat honey roast cashew nuts, turmeric chicken in a kind of freeze bag, and these things, Colombian lucho delitos, which are wrapped in a leaf, and they're great, very, very good. Will recommended those to me, and I've been eating them for a couple of years now. They G'd me up, and I got my 3rd Strava King of the Mountain crown, which was surprising. And day 3, there's about 300 left. We were pretty strung out. We had a there and back mountain up, route up a mountain, Tarani Gesell, and it was great to see everybody together, kind of going up and down this mountain. And I was starting to feel at home in the mountains, actually, at this point. The race, the fury of it, I was starting to find my place there. Just this tiny speck crawling across the landscape. And you start with the sea behind you, and then you realise you're just slowly passing the sea on your right, and you're just moving across an entire country, Wales. It's crazy. I was very happy to jog into camp at 9:20, and I spent some time chatting with a guy, James, from Maine, Massachusetts, and we discovered that we were both celebrating our 50th birthday by doing the Boston, doing the Dragon Track. Go, 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 4:40, left the camp at 6. There you go, there's James. Left the camp at 17 minutes past 6. So I was happy to do that. And met a guy, Ian, who gave an expert guide for these very creepy forests at the start of day 4. And it's the longest day, but it's flatter, so it's 71 kilometres. And I was talking with Nat, who's a mountain rescue doctor from the Peak District, and we were chatting away when her friend Lisa came flying by. What you find is that the slow guys like me would start earlier, and the fast guys who are winning the race, who sort of competed, start maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours after you. And they just, particularly on the downhill bits, particularly when you're going down like that, when I'm stumbling down, these people just don't touch the ground. They're effortless. And Lisa went by like a blur, and by the end of the day, she was in first place, which was great. Nice person. 12:45, I went into a little village, and suddenly there was a voice, a familiar voice, and it was my friend Wendy. She was a dear friend from 20 years ago in London, when she emigrated to Australia, and she married a guy from whose parents are from Eland and grew up there, and she happened to be back. Happened to be back in the middle of a little village, happened to have gone out for a swim that morning, and happened to be walking back as I walked past, which was, it's a small world. Just went past the bakery when they were taking out bacon croissant from the oven, which were truly Michelin 3-star. And there was also a chemist where I was able to buy a toothbrush which was a fairly serious omission from my kit list. The race was getting clear. Like day 1 to 3 were hard, mountainous up and down. Day 4 and 5 are long but flat, and they're just a different part of the ever-changing thing. And day 4 was kind of a war of attrition. It just kind of starts sucking your body and your mind and your spirit till you have the strength to keep going, just plod on. And the nice thing was that the smaller number of people, like band of brothers, was getting closer and closer. And we had great conversations with a guy from Dan from Sustainable Construction, and with Jacob, my triathlete friend from day 1. And then RAF gave us a flight, RAF Hercules gave us a flyby later on, which was fun. And then we descended down the mountains, and suddenly we were surrounded by millions of bluebells, which was spellbinding. So conversations were great and sustained me during the day, and maybe my body was getting used to the mountains. So I got into camp at 8:40, which was my best time by half an hour, and they had lasagna and cheesy chips for dinner, which was great. I had an appetite. Day 5, 6:01:50, I left, and it's supposed to be an easy day, but it's still 63 kilometres. But it's still 63 kilometres long, and it has a bit of a sting in it. I was walking with a guy called Ben, who's a master hillman and builder from the Pennines, and we were sharing our love of travel books like Eric Newby's Last Great Grain Race and South by Shackleton. And Ben and I came up with a guy, Chris, who was a super fit racing snake doctor from Bristol. He, like a lot of other very fast guys, his legs were in so much bad trouble that he was going down the mountains backwards. And so Ben came along, and we grabbed him by one arm each, and we walked him down the mountain, guided it. It was a small gesture because we knew that was just one mountain, and there were lots more for him to do. We did pass a house on the route, and the residents had put out cups of water for us. And it was very nice relief from, we were by that point I was drinking from mountain streams most of the time, hoping that there wasn't any dead sheep on them. But more importantly, it was just a kind of act of kindness that really brought tears to my eyes. It meant a lot to me. The late afternoon, the sting in the tail was the Black Mountain. It looms out of the flatter lands beyond it. And it's like the Lonely Mountain in The Hobbit. It's the final challenge, the home of the dragon that must be slain. It's also the land of my fathers. And my great-grandfather left the village of Gavilan, which is in the Brecon Beacons, a few miles from the base, in 1870 to seek his fortune. And in a strange way, as I climbed it for the first time, it felt like I was coming home. There were wild white horses with long manes at the top, grazing and running around. And from the top, instead of the sea being on your right, the sea was straight ahead, which was good to see. I dipped into the final checkpoint on the final mountain. You had to hit every one, or you were disqualified. And I realised I was nearly there. So the weariness of 300 kilometres and 15,000 metres were fading from my legs. And for the first time in days, I started running down the hills and running up the hills. I just ran down this mountain. It was fantastic. Just for the joy of running, not caring about what my legs could do. Down in the last valleys, I did the last few miles with Pamela, an architect from Texas, and Mike, who's an American ex-serviceman. So Mike was moved about the war in Iraq. So he pushed a stroller across America, west to east. And he put a handwritten yellow flag every mile for every fallen serviceman who died in the war in Iraq. And he did a bit of clever electronics. They were all online so the families could see. And a bit later, some of the families started contacting him saying they couldn't find their sons and daughters. And what he found back by emailing was their children had died in Afghanistan, not Iraq. So a couple of years later, he crossed America north to south and put a yellow flag for every serviceman who died across. You met some great people on the route. We passed a castle, the final castle, which used to be the finish, and I led Mike and Pam, we'd done the whole course together to go to the finish. And as I approached the finish line, I saw my friend Pete on the side. So I knew instantly that it could only mean one thing, that he hadn't made a cut-off, and my heart sank. So I stopped, we talked, and he confirmed that he'd been battling sickness and sleeplessness for a lot of time, and he'd taken a wrong turn on the Black Mountain. And on the final mountain, on the final cut-off, he'd missed it by 15 minutes, which was ridiculous. So he told me to go on. He said he was happy that I was finishing, because he could do it. And so it was a mixture of huge joy and relief. That's Mike and Pam finishing, and that was me. And my son was family were watching at home. And the club, of course, the Harrys. So I picked up my finisher's dragon. I shared a meal and photos with my new friends, with Mike. So that's my dragon. I've called it Smorg, a literary connotation. And we had a food with Mike, the guy who crosses America, with a stroller, and with Nat, the doctor from the Peak District, and with Pete. And we celebrated. It was great to have some unhealthy, non-race food with Pete. And it has been hard to get back to the rest of my life. I miss it. I really miss. I can understand Forrest Gump mentality. Just being in the hills, going and going and never coming back. The idea of just the simplicity of just one foot in front of another, and just the aching beauty of the mountains. So I completed the 2019 Dragon's Back race in 73 hours, 31 minutes and 30 seconds. I was 239th out of 251. It's the best race I've ever done. There were 402 starters, athletes from 32 nations. All of them were in a water race. And speaking to them, they all agreed that there is no race anywhere better than the race. Thank you.